The White House, 10:15 a.m. March 30th, 2025. The press briefing had been delayed by 15 minutes. The official reason? The White House press secretary had a scheduling conflict, but in this room, no one was buying it. She probably needed a little extra time to pump herself up. A voice murmured from the middle row. Can you blame her? Have you seen Caitlin? If I were Caroline, I need a deep breath, too. The name lingered in the air. Caitlin Collins, seated front and center, exuded the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you have all the right questions and none of the answers. From the other side, her presence was like the loaded chamber of a gun, waiting for the right moment to fire. After all, it wasn't just one scandal that brought the press corps together today. The signal message leak had laid bare confidential military plans. And then there was Trump's explosive claim that Biden's pardons might be invalid because they were allegedly signed with an autopen. The stakes were impossible to ignore, and as the heavy doors swung open, Caroline Leavitt made her entrance. She strode to the podium with the kind of practiced composure that once worked well on Fox News. A quick smile flashed, a little too rehearsed. The bright lights caught the tension tightening the corners of her mouth. Still, she held her ground. Good morning. I apologize for the delay. We have plenty to cover today. But Caitlin wasn't interested in polite formalities. Her microphone was already raised. Madam Secretary, the signal message leak involving senior officials has exposed details of classified military operations. Can you tell us how the administration is addressing this breach and who will be held accountable? The question was sharp, straight to the point. No soft lead-ins. Just like that, the floodgates were open. Caroline's smile didn't falter, not yet. We do not comment on unverified leaks. But Caitlin wasn't letting go. She leaned forward, locking eyes with Caroline like a cat ready to pounce. Unverified? Then why did President Trump defend Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth while blaming National Security Advisor Mike Waltz? If nothing was credible, why assign blame so quickly? Caroline gripped the edge of the podium, her polished confidence beginning to slip. The president is committed to ensuring national security. Any speculation from the press will not derail the administration's efforts. It was a pivot, classic, but Caitlin was ready. Then let's talk about the president's recent claims regarding President Biden's pardons. He suggested that some might be invalid because they were signed with an autopen. Does the administration have any evidence to support that statement? There it was, the second strike, and this time the impact was visible. Caroline blinked, a half-second too long. The room felt it, the ripple of uncertainty. We believe the American people deserve transparency. Questions surrounding the validity of those pardons are legitimate, and we will continue to monitor the situation. But what evidence do you have? Caitlin's words sliced through the air. If the president is making these claims, surely there's something to back them up. Or is this simply another baseless accusation? The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room bore down on Caroline. The tension coiled, daring her to make the next move, and she did. Caitlin, you're a journalist. Isn't it your job to find the truth? Why don't you figure it out? A moment passed, then another. Fingers tapped furiously on laptops, pens scratched against notepads, camera shutters clicked. Caroline's deflection didn't break the tension, it only magnified it. But before the pressure could consume her, another voice rang out. Peter Alexander, NBC News. His tone was even, but the challenge was clear. Can you at least confirm whether the administration has any actual evidence to support the president's claims? Caroline turned toward him, her smile returning, but visibly strained. We will provide updates as we continue gathering information. But Peter wasn't satisfied. Andrea Mitchell, MSNBC, came the next voice. There are reports of internal disagreement over how the signal leak was handled. Can you address that? Caroline's fingers curled slightly against the podium. The room could see it now, the growing cracks. Next question. Fox News headquarters, New York City. In the towering glass building, the lights of the Fox News studio glared with the intensity of a breaking story. On the massive screen in the control room, Caroline Leavitt's image remained frozen mid-sentence, her face taut from the relentless barrage of questions from Caitlin Collins. The White House press briefing had been nothing short of a disaster. The leak of signal messages exposing sensitive military plans, the claims of invalid Biden pardons allegedly signed with an autopen. The weight of these controversies had crushed Leavitt. But here at Fox News, failure wasn't the final act. Not if Suzanne Scott, the network CEO, had anything to say about it. She's here. Scott's voice cut through the hum of producers shuffling papers and scanning teleprompters. She just arrived, Tucker's waiting. Tucker Carlson, the face of primetime Fox News, was the last line of defense. His orders were clear, not to uncover the truth, not to dissect the scandal, but to rewrite the narrative. If the White House press room had been the battlefield, the Fox studio would be the cleanup crew. In the dressing room, Caroline Leavitt stared at her reflection. The sharp navy blazer hugged her shoulders, perfectly concealing the trembling tension beneath. No flashbacks here, no Caitlin Collins waiting to pounce. On this stage, the script was hers to control. A knock at the door. 1 minute. She inhaled deeply. No retreat, only forward. The studio glowed under the harsh lights. The Fox News logo gleamed behind the polished desk. Tucker Carlson, ever composed, greeted viewers with his trademark smirk. Good evening, and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. After today's disgraceful display of media bias at the White House, we're honored to have the press secretary herself, Caroline Leavitt, join us to share what the corporate media won't. The screen split, Caroline's composed face appearing next to Tucker's. Gone was the tension from earlier. Here she had a lifeline. Thank you, Tucker, she said, the warmth in her tone calculated. It's no surprise that certain members of the press chose theatrics over facts today. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to set the record straight. Tucker nodded, his voice dripping with controlled indignation. The real story here isn't the White House's response. It's the unchecked power of the judiciary. Single judges in single cities are attempting to override the president's constitutional authority. This is a direct threat to our democracy, isn't it, Caroline? Caroline didn't hesitate. Absolutely. What we're seeing is judicial overreach at its worst. The president was elected to lead, yet these unelected judges are attempting to block his every decision. The American people didn't vote for them. They voted for Donald Trump. The clip from the White House played, her voice echoing through the studio. You have single judges in single cities and lower courts trying to determine the way in which the president handles foreign relations. They cannot be allowed to do that. Tucker nodded solemnly. And yet the mainstream media refuses to cover this. Instead, they twist the narrative to vilify you and the administration. Why do you think that is? Caroline's lips curled into a knowing smile. Because the truth threatens their agenda. The same people who cry about protecting democracy are the ones undermining it. They want a judiciary that serves their interests, not the American people's. It was flawless, but Tucker wasn't done. There was still the lingering contradiction, and so, like a blade sliding silently from its sheath, he asked, Caroline, the Trump administration appointed many conservative judges who've handed down rulings favorable to the president's policies. If those judges were to rule against him tomorrow, would the administration still argue that it's judicial overreach? For the briefest moment, Caroline faltered. It wasn't in the plan, but the camera was rolling, the nation was watching. Our expectation, she began carefully, is that judges interpret the law as it stands. If a judge, conservative or liberal, chooses to overstep their authority and legislate from the bench, that is unacceptable. The American people deserve better. It was an answer, but not a strong one. The line between conviction and contradiction was growing razor thin. Even Tucker knew it, but his job wasn't to break her. It was to salvage what could be salvaged. Fair point, Caroline, he said smoothly. And I think Americans are tired of seeing the law weaponized for political gain. But one last question. If the administration truly believes in transparency, when can we expect to see the evidence supporting President Trump's claim about the auto pardons? A sharper turn, Caroline's hands clasped just slightly tighter in her lap. We are committed to transparency, Tucker. The American people will have their answers. Unlike the left, we don't hide behind legal loopholes and judicial activism. We stand for truth. The words hung in the air, but their hollowness was evident. No evidence had been presented, no real defense had been made, only deflection, polished and packaged for the Fox News audience. Tucker smiled once more. Thank you for your candor, Caroline. The White House is lucky to have you. The screen faded, the lights dimmed, but even as the crew moved on to the next segment, one truth remained. No amount of spin could undo what had happened at the White House, and despite their best efforts, Caroline Leavitt wasn't just fighting the press anymore. She was fighting herself. Next question, whether it was the glare of the studio lights or the weight of his thick navy suit, a thin sheen of sweat had begun to glisten on Tucker Carlson's forehead. He shifted slightly in his chair, his movements deliberate, a practiced gesture signaling the next pivot. The tension in the air lingered, though the audience watching from home might only sense it in the slightest quiver of Caroline Leavitt's voice. Caroline, Tucker began, his tone low and steady, the embodiment of a confidant rather than a challenger. We've covered the threat posed by Trend Nicaragua, but critics say the administration is taking the alien enemies act too far. They argue that it's not just targeting terrorists, but sweeping up innocent people, immigrants without criminal records, individuals caught in bureaucratic errors. How do you respond to that? Caroline's fingers curled slightly on her lap. She'd prepared for this. She had rehearsed every possible counter. But facing Tucker under the glaring lights, the words felt heavier. Tucker, the president has made it clear. Protecting the American people is his highest priority. No one is suggesting that every single deportation involves a hardened criminal, but the fact remains, anyone in this country without legal documentation has broken the law. The administration is simply enforcing those laws. The confidence in her voice held, but only just. The words were firm, yet beneath them was a faint tremor, a thin crack that Tucker's trained eye caught instantly. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. But, Caroline, reports are also clear that many of those deported were individuals simply waiting for their court hearings, caught in the backlog of our immigration system. Some of them had no criminal ties whatsoever. Isn't it possible that the administration is punishing people for the failures of a broken bureaucracy? Caroline's smile, though still intact, lost a touch of its brightness. The cracks were beginning to widen. Tucker, no system is perfect, but the president is acting on intelligence and making the tough decisions necessary to protect our citizens. Mistakes are unfortunate, but they're not the focus here. The focus is ensuring that terrorist networks don't exploit our borders. She delivered the line without faltering, but even she could feel its emptiness. Tucker, however, remained unflinching. The show wasn't about breaking Caroline, not directly. It was about letting the weight of her own words settle in. And yet, Tucker pressed, his voice as calm as ever. The Alien Enemies Act was designed for wartime threats. Applying it to immigration on this scale is unprecedented. Can you assure the American people that this isn't simply a convenient tool for mass deportations? Caroline shifted slightly in her chair. The temperature in the studio seemed to rise. She could feel the gaze of millions, Fox News loyalists, skeptical critics, and White House aides alike, waiting for her next move. The president is using every legal means at his disposal to protect this country. The suggestion that this is political is absurd. Trendawa is a terrorist organization. They are not innocent migrants, and we cannot allow them to operate on our soil. The words came quickly, almost forcefully, but Tucker didn't flinch. He knew the subtle difference between strength and desperation, and so did his audience. But Caroline, he continued, his tone dipping into something closer to concern. You've said this isn't just about Trendawa. The act is also targeting individuals considered a threat, yet we've seen no clear guidelines on how those decisions are made. What safeguards are in place to prevent abuse? A flicker of something, uncertainty, perhaps, crossed Caroline's face. She blinked, forcing herself to maintain composure. The response should have been easy, but now it tangled in her thoughts. The American people trust this administration to make the right decisions. Classified intelligence and national security measures aren't always something we can publicly disclose, but I assure you, the president is acting in the best interest of this country. The words landed flat. Even Caroline could hear it. A practiced line delivered without the conviction she had wielded earlier. Tucker let the silence linger just a heartbeat longer than usual, not enough to break her, but enough for the audience to feel the shift. The polished facade was beginning to slip, and finally, Caroline, Tucker's voice lowered, almost gentle now. Critics warned that invoking the Alien Enemies Act like this sets a dangerous precedent. If a future administration wanted to weaponize it against other groups, what's to stop them? The question hovered, cold and unforgiving. Caroline's fingers curled tighter. She blinked once, then again, the flicker of hesitation impossible to hide. I would say the president is doing what's necessary, and history will remember that. The words echoed, but their weight was hollow. Tucker held her gaze for a moment longer, as though giving her one last chance to reclaim control, but it was too late. "Thank you, Caroline," he said, the practiced warmth returning to his voice. "We appreciate your time and your perspective tonight. The American people will decide for themselves." The camera slowly zoomed out, the Fox News logo reclaiming the screen. In the control room, Suzanne Scott watched in silence. No shouts, no frantic commands, just the hum of the broadcast winding down. She didn't need to say a word. The cracks were visible now, even through the gloss of primetime television. Caroline Leavitt stood, her smile still in place, but the tightness in her shoulders betrayed her. She exchanged polite words with Tucker, the formalities as seamless as ever, but as she walked off the set, the weight of the performance lingered, and in the minds of those watching, a single question remained, not about the law, nor the terrorists, nor the policy, but about Caroline Leavitt herself. If anyone was paying close attention, they'd notice the faint glint of restlessness in Caroline Leavitt's eyes. It had been a long day, a relentless barrage of press questions, public scrutiny, and a media circus that refused to slow down. But that was the job. No one said being the White House press secretary would be easy. She stole a quick glance at her wristwatch. 30 minutes left. Half the show still remained. Today wasn't just a bad day. It was one she'd rather forget. But the cameras were rolling, and no matter how much Fox News producers stretched the commercial breaks to give her a breather, the inevitable had arrived. Back in the control room, the directive came through Tucker Carlson's earpiece. The voice was steady, firm. "Keep it soft. Do your best to pull her through." Tucker nodded slightly. His job was clear. No fireworks, no confrontations, just a steady hand to keep Caroline from slipping further. But what the producers didn't account for was the sheer gravity of the moment, because no matter how hard Tucker tried, Caroline was already on the path of self-destruction. "Welcome back to Tucker Carlson Tonight." Tucker's voice rang out smoothly. "We're continuing our conversation with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. And of course, immigration remains one of the most pressing issues of our time." Caroline straightened her posture, the camera capturing her attempt at a composed smile, but beneath the surface, the cracks were forming. "Caroline," Tucker began, his tone deliberately gentle. "President Trump made a clear promise during his campaign to build a border wall and to have Mexico pay for it. Yet here we are. The wall is incomplete and American taxpayers have footed the bill. Meanwhile, mass deportations are facing legal challenges at every turn. How do you respond to those who say this is a failure of the administration's immigration policy?" A flicker of tension passed over Caroline's face. The words were simple enough, but the weight behind them was unbearable. She had rehearsed 100 different responses, but under the heat of the lights, none of them felt sufficient. "Well, Tucker," she began, her voice carefully measured, "President Trump has done more to secure our borders than any leader in recent history. Hundreds of miles of the border wall have been completed, and more importantly, we've restored law and order." Tucker nodded, offering a slight sense of validation, but he wasn't done. "But Caroline," he continued, "even with those miles of wall, Mexico hasn't paid a dime, and the American taxpayer is left covering the costs. Critics argue that's a clear failure of one of the administration's core promises. Isn't that fair criticism?" The smile on Caroline's face strained, the air grew heavier. She could almost feel the eyes watching her from the White House, from Fox News headquarters, from living rooms across the country. "Protecting the American people is not about tallying up who paid for what," she retorted, the defensive edge in her voice undeniable. "The president negotiated successfully with Mexico to enhance their border security, which has significantly reduced crossings. That's a success. It wasn't convincing, not to Tucker, not to the viewers, and most importantly, not to herself." "Fair enough," Tucker replied, keeping his expression neutral. "But there's something else. There's been talk and even proposals about using the military to conduct large-scale deportations. Critics say that's authoritarian, even dangerous. What's the administration's response to those concerns?" Caroline stiffened. She had expected this, but expectation didn't make it easier. This wasn't just a policy question. It was an accusation of abuse of power, and she had one job: to deny it. "That's absolutely absurd," she shot back, her voice sharp. "The president is using every tool at his disposal to protect this country. Utilizing military resources to assist in national security operations is not a sign of authoritarianism. It's a sign of strong leadership." Tucker nodded slightly, though there was an unmistakable shift in the air. Even the loyal Fox News audience could feel it. The more Caroline spoke, the further she drifted. "But Caroline," Tucker pressed gently, "deploying the military to round up millions of people, doesn't that sound like something out of a police state? Is that really the image of America the administration wants to project?" For a moment, Caroline froze. There it was, the unanswerable question. Every instinct told her to deflect, to pivot, to blame the media, but she didn't. Instead, driven by the mounting frustration, she leaned into the very narrative she should have avoided. "Tucker," she said firmly, her eyes narrowing, "if using the military means ensuring the safety of American citizens, then yes, every measure should be on the table. The president will not apologize for putting America first." The words hit like a thud, no nuance, no reassurance, just raw, unfiltered conviction, and in that moment, she didn't just defend the policy, she embodied it. Tucker held her gaze. His expression betrayed nothing. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. "Thank you for your time, Caroline," Tucker said, his voice calm. "We appreciate you being here and giving the American people your perspective." The camera pulled back, the bright lights of the studio dimmed. Caroline stood, offering a brief handshake before turning away, but the stiffness in her shoulders remained. She had survived the segment, but not unscathed. In the control room, Suzanne Scott sat in silence, her fingers drumming lightly on the desk. No words were exchanged. There was no need. The image of Caroline Leavitt, defiant, unwavering, and utterly exposed, was all anyone would remember, and as the next segment rolled in, one thing became clear. Caroline hadn't just faced tough questions. She had become the story, the mainstream media's victory lap. If there was ever a perfect moment for the mainstream media to pop the champagne, it was now. Caroline Leavitt's catastrophic appearance on Fox News was more than just a stumble. It was a free gift, neatly wrapped and delivered to the gleeful anchors at CNN and MSNBC, and no one was savoring the moment quite like Rachel Maddow. The MSNBC studio lit up as Maddow began her segment, her signature smirk firmly in place. She didn't need notes. The disaster spoke for itself. If there were an award for most committed attempt at self-destruction on live TV, I think we'd have a clear winner tonight. Caroline Leavitt, ladies and gentlemen. The screen behind her flickered to life, replaying the now infamous moment when Leavitt stumbled through her justification for the incomplete border wall. Tucker Carlson's carefully blank expression did little to mask the sinking realization that even he couldn't save her. Ah yes, the wall that was supposed to be paid for by Mexico, but is now generously funded by American taxpayers. But don't worry, it's not fully complete, which is just a fancy way of saying unfinished. I mean, who needs a whole wall when you can just have a very expensive fence that ends abruptly? Laughter rippled through the studio, but Matt was just getting started. She leaned forward, voice dripping with mock sincerity. And then, of course, there's the little detail of President Trump's new plan to deploy the military for mass deportations, because naturally, when you can't finish a wall, why not roll out the tanks? Very minimalist, very efficient. It's practically modern art in the world of authoritarian chic. The clip rolled once again. This time it was Leavitt's strained attempt to defend the use of military force, claiming it was a sign of strong leadership. Matt tilted her head, pretending to ponder. Strong leadership? Right, because when the only tool you have is a military, suddenly every immigrant looks like a national security threat. But sure, why not? Maybe the tanks will also help fill in those not fully complete parts of the wall. Another wave of laughter, but Matt wasn't done. The piece de resistance was the moment Tucker Carlson, Fox News' own poster boy of conservative rhetoric, visibly hesitated. He had tried to steer her back, offer her a lifeline, yet Leavitt, in her unwavering loyalty to Trump's narrative, had simply doubled down. You could practically see Tucker's soul leave his body. Even he was thinking, do I rescue her, or do I just let this happen? The MSNBC host shrugged dramatically, her grin widening. I mean, if Tucker Carlson is questioning your reasoning, it might be time to rethink some choices. Social media had wasted no time. Within minutes of the interview airing, hashtags like hashtag Leavitt meltdown and hashtag military deportations began trending. TikTok was flooded with mashups of Leavitt's most disastrous sound bites layered over dramatic music. One viral edit had even inserted explosions and military drums, captioned, "When you promise a border wall, but get a military parade instead." On Twitter, Caitlin Collins from CNN wasn't holding back either. She opened her broadcast with the same clip, but this time her delivery was sharpened by a smile that barely concealed her satisfaction. If confidence alone could build walls, Caroline Leavitt might have something to show for it. Unfortunately, no amount of bravado can change the fact that Mexico never paid. The wall is unfinished, and American taxpayers are footing the bill. The screen split to show a close-up of Leavitt's tense expression mid-sentence. Collins didn't miss a beat. And let's not forget her other brilliant solution, using the military for mass deportations, because apparently the White House has decided that when all else fails, democracy is just a suggestion. It was open season, and everyone wanted a shot. Trevor Noah on The Daily Show had the audience roaring as he gleefully dissected the spectacle. Deploying the military to deport immigrants? What's next? Aircraft carriers parked at the Rio Grande. I'm just saying, if your immigration policy needs fighter jets, maybe it's not a policy, maybe it's a video game. He shook his head, chuckling. And Caroline thought she was winning that argument. Sweetheart, if even Tucker Carlson is looking at you like he wants a commercial break, you're not winning. You're the content now. While mainstream media anchors celebrated, the conservative spin machine kicked in a high gear. Sean Hannity predictably rushed to Leavitt's defense, declaring the interview a media ambush designed to undermine the administration. Caroline Leavitt stood tall in the face of liberal media's lies. They don't care about facts. They just want to tear down a strong, effective leader. Meanwhile, Charlie Kirk on Turning Point USA adopted a different tactic: blame. The left, the media elites are attacking Caroline because she dared to tell the truth. They want open borders, they want chaos, and when someone like Levitt speaks up, they panic. But the damage was already done. Every desperate attempt at damage control only amplified the interview's viral presence. The Atlantic published a gleeful op-ed titled "Levitt's Military Misstep, a Masterclass in Messaging Failure." By the time the weekend hit, every major outlet had taken their turn at the piñata, and as Rachel Maddow wrapped up her segment, her closing words hung heavy, both in sarcasm and brutal honesty. The White House may have sent Caroline Levitt to defend their policies, but tonight the only thing she managed to defend was our collective right to a good laugh. The cameras cut, the credits rolled, and in the world of news, one thing was clear. When a press secretary crashes and burns on live TV, it's not just a headline. It's a week's worth of free content. The White House lay in darkness after a long and exhausting day, while the media celebrated in a frenzy. The night buzzed with relentless chatter, yet outside, the Washington Monument stood tall and silent, an unmoving witness to all that had unfolded.